Park Jun sat quietly in the metal chair, his hands folded in his lap. The alien courtroom buzzed with strange sounds and smells that made his nose wrinkle. 3 tall creatures with purple skin and too many eyes stared down at him from their high platform. Their translator devices made clicking noises before speaking in broken human language. "Human Park Jun," the middle alien said, its voice like grinding metal. "You have been found guilty of trespassing in restricted space. You will serve your sentence in the infinite labyrinth of Kethver." Park Jun nodded politely. He had expected this outcome. The diplomatic mission had gone badly from the start. Ambassador Kim Nari had warned him that some alien species did not like humans very much. They thought humans were too young and stupid to be part of the galaxy community. The aliens whispered among themselves in their own language. Park Jun caught a few words from his translation implant. They were excited about something. One of them seemed to be laughing. "Transport the prisoner," the lead judge commanded. 2 guards grabbed Park Jun's arms. He did not fight them. The guards looked like walking trees with armor plating. They were much stronger than him, and fighting would only make things worse. They dragged him through long corridors filled with more strange aliens. Some pointed at him and made noises that might have been laughter. The transport ship was small and cramped. Park Jun sat between his 2 guards for what felt like hours. Through the small window, he watched stars turn into lines as they jumped through hyperspace. He had seen this effect many times during his work on space stations, but it still amazed him. "Where are we going exactly?" Park Jun asked one of the guards. The guard looked at him with what might have been surprise. "You do not know about the infinite labyrinth?" "No," Park Jun said honestly. "I am new to this part of space." Both guards made sounds like grinding. "Rocks?" Park Jun realized they were laughing at him. "The infinite labyrinth has held prisoners for 3,000 years, the first guard explained. "No one has ever escaped. No one has ever found the exit. Most prisoners die within 30 days. "How do they die?" Park Jun asked, genuinely curious. "Some starve. Some go mad from walking in circles forever. Some just give up and lie down until their hearts stop beating." The guards seemed to enjoy sharing this information. The maze plays tricks on your mind. It makes you see things that are not there. It changes its walls while you sleep. It is alive, you see. It learns how each species thinks and then drives them crazy. Park Jun considered this information. It sounded like a very poorly designed prison system. Any structure that killed most of its prisoners was inefficient and wasteful. But he kept these thoughts to himself. The ship landed with a heavy thud. The guards pulled Park Jun out onto a rocky planet with purple sky and 2 small suns. In front of them stood a massive wall made of what looked like living flesh. The wall pulsed like a heartbeat and glistened with moisture. Strange veins ran through its surface, glowing with dim light. "Welcome to your new home, human," said a new voice. Park Jun turned to see another alien. This one, tall and thin with silver skin and a head shaped like a triangle. It wore elaborate robes covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. "I am Warden Vextal," the creature continued. "I have overseen this facility for 600 years. In that time, I have processed over 10,000 prisoners from 400 different species. Not one has ever left this place alive." "That seems like a high mortality rate," Park Jun observed. "Have you considered that the system might need some improvements?" Vextal made a sound like steam escaping from a pipe. Park Jun realized this was alien laughter. "Improvements?" Vextal repeated. "Human, this is not a rehabilitation center. This is the ultimate punishment." The maze was grown using the most advanced bioengineering in the galaxy. It reads the minds of those who enter. It learns their fears, their hopes, their ways of thinking. Then it uses this knowledge to trap them forever. The warden gestured toward the fleshy wall. A section of it began to iris open like a giant eye, revealing a dark corridor beyond. "The maze has over 1 million passages," Vextal continued. "Its walls can reshape themselves at will. It creates false exits to raise hope. then crushes that hope by leading prisoners back to where they started. It shows illusions of rescue ships, of family members, of anything the prisoner wants to see. It is the perfect trap for any thinking mind. Park Jun peered into the dark opening. He could see the corridor stretching away into shadows. The walls inside also looked organic, with the same pulsing veins and wet surfaces. The maze provides basic nutrition through spores in the air, Vextel explained. So prisoners do not die of hunger immediately. This allows for a maximum psychological suffering before eventual death. Most species last between 20 and 40 days before complete mental breakdown. What about water? Park Jun asked. The walls secrete a nutritious fluid when touched with the tongue, the warden replied. Again, this is designed to keep prisoners alive long enough to suffer properly. Park Jun nodded thoughtfully. The whole system seemed unnecessarily complicated to him. If the goal was to keep prisoners contained, there were much simpler and more effective methods. But different species probably had different ideas about punishment and deterrence. Do I get any equipment? Park Jun asked. This question seemed to amuse Vextel greatly. The alien's triangle-shaped head tilted back and it made more steam hissing. Sounds. Equipment? Vextel repeated. Human, you go into the maze with only the clothes you wear. No tools, no weapons, no communication devices. Nothing that might help you escape the maze's influence. What about my backpack? Park Jun gestured to the small bag he had been carrying when arrested. Vextel looked at the guards, who both shrugged their massive shoulders. What does it contain? The warden asked. Work tools, Park Jun replied. Nothing dangerous, just things I use for my job. One of the guards opened the backpack and pulled out its contents. There was a tablet computer, some measuring tools, a water bottle, energy bars, a small first aid kit, and various engineering instruments. Nothing looked like a weapon. These items will not help you escape, Vextel decided after examining them. In fact, it will be amusing to watch you cling to these useless human devices while the maze slowly drives you insane. You may keep them. The guard stuffed everything back into the backpack and handed it to Park Jun. Any last words before you enter your eternal prison? Vextel asked, clearly enjoying this moment. Park Jun shouldered his backpack and walked toward the iris opening. He paused at the threshold and turned back to the warden. Could I also get a bottle of water? He asked politely. The kind you can carry around, I mean. The wall-licking thing sounds unsanitary. Vextel stared at him for a long moment, then gestured to one of the guards. The guard produced a metal water bottle and tossed it to Park Jun, who caught it easily. Thank you, Park Jun said. I appreciate the hospitality. He stepped through the iris opening into the maze. Behind him, he heard Vextel say something to the guards in their alien language. They all made hissing sounds that were probably laughter. The iris closed behind Park Jun with a wet sucking sound. He was alone. In the corridor, surrounded by living walls that pulsed with alien heartbeats. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear other sounds, footsteps, voices, maybe other prisoners walking in circles. Park Jun pulled out his tablet and turned it on. The screen lit up, showing his usual construction management software. He opened the mapping application and began walking down the corridor, the tablet recording his path automatically. After all, this was just another building project that needed proper surveying. Park Jun walked through the corridor for exactly 15 minutes, his tablet faithfully recording every turn and measurement. The walls around him pulsed with that strange organic rhythm, and a thin layer of moisture made everything slippery. Under his fingers, the air smelled like wet concrete mixed with something sweet and rotten. He passed 3 other prisoners during his initial survey. The first was a creature that looked like a walking crystal formation. It stood perfectly still at an intersection, staring at the wall with what might have been despair. When Park Jun greeted it politely, the crystal being did not respond. The second prisoner was something resembling a large insect with bright blue chitin. It skittered past Park Jun without acknowledgement, muttering in a language that sounded like clicking typewriter keys. The creature's movements seemed frantic and purposeless. The third prisoner was the most disturbing. It appeared to be another human, or at least humanoid, wearing the tattered remains of a uniform Park Jun did not recognize. This being sat against a wall, rocking back and forth while whispering numbers in what sounded like standard galactic. "Excuse me," Park Jun said, kneeling beside the figure. "Are you all right?" The humanoid looked up with eyes that had no focus. "Day 4012, it whispered. "Day 4012. The exit was here yesterday. Today it is gone. Tomorrow it will be somewhere else. Day 4012. Park Jun realized this prisoner had been counting days for over 10 years. The maze had not killed this being quickly. Instead, it had trapped them in an endless cycle of false hope and crushing disappointment. "What species are you?" Park Jun asked gently. "Vicarian," the prisoner replied without stopping the rocking motion. "We are a proud species. We built cities among the stars. We mapped nebulae and tamed black holes, but this maze cannot be mapped. It changes, it lies. It laughs at our attempts to understand it." Park Jun made a note on his tablet about the Vicarian prisoner's condition, then continued his survey. The corridor system seemed to follow a basic pattern despite its organic nature. There were main passages, smaller side passages, and what appeared to be dead ends. The ceiling height remained constant at approximately 4 meters. After walking for another 10 minutes, Park Jun stopped at a major intersection where 6 passages met. He looked up at the ceiling above him, studying its construction. The walls, it was made of the same organic material, pulsing and breathing like living tissue. Park Jun had spent 15 years designing and building structures in low-gravity environments. He had worked on space stations, asteroid mining facilities, and orbital habitats. In all that time, he had learned one important lesson: when you cannot solve a problem by going through it, you solve it by going around it, under it, or over it. He pulled out his tablet and switched to the structural analysis program. Using the device's sensors, he began measuring the wall thickness, density, and apparent tensile strength of the organic material. The readings were interesting. The walls were surprisingly thin for a structure this size, only about 2 meters thick. The material itself was strong but flexible, designed to reshape rather than break under stress. Most importantly, the walls showed significant hollow spaces within their structure. This made sense from an engineering perspective. Any living system this large would need internal circulation for nutrients, waste removal, and control signals. These would be like the electrical conduits and plumbing in a normal building. Park Jun looked up at the ceiling again. 4 meters high. In his rock climbing days back on Earth, he had free-climbed walls much higher than this. The organic surface would actually provide excellent grip. With all its ridges and moisture, he took off his backpack and pulled out his climbing tools. When the guards had examined his equipment, they had seen only strange human devices. They had missed the significance of the small metal spikes, the flexible cable, and the grip-enhancing powder. Park Jun found a corner where 2 walls met and began his ascent. The organic material was indeed perfect for climbing. His fingers found easy holds in the natural ridges and valleys of the wall surface. The moisture that made walking treacherous actually improved his grip on the vertical surface. As he climbed, the wall began to react to his presence. The material around his hands started to pulse faster, and he could feel it trying to shift and change. But the wall could only reshape slowly, and Park Jun climbed much faster than it could adapt. 30 seconds later, he reached the top of the wall and pulled himself up. What he saw made him smile for the first time since his arrest. The maze spread out below him like a vast circuit board made of flesh. From this elevated position, Park Jun could see the true structure of the facility. The passages formed clear patterns, geometric shapes that repeated throughout the complex. There were central hubs connected by main arteries with smaller capillary passages branching off in fractal patterns. What the aliens called an infinite labyrinth was actually a fairly standard radial design, like the spoke pattern of a wheel. At the center of the wheel, about 2 kilometers away, Park Jun could see a large central structure that pulsed with brighter light than the surrounding passages. He pulled out his tablet and began taking pictures and measurements from his elevated position. The mapping software quickly began building a three-dimensional model of the entire facility. Within minutes, Park Jun had more information about the maze structure than any prisoner in 3,000 years. Looking down into the passages below, he could see dozens of other prisoners wandering aimlessly through the corridors. Some moved in groups, others walked alone. All of them kept their eyes focused on the walls around them, never looking up. They were trapped in two-dimensional thinking, trying to solve a three-dimensional problem. Park Jun noticed something else from his high vantage point. The walls might reshape themselves, but they only did so at ground level. The upper portions remained stable, probably because the maze's control system was not designed to account for prisoners who could climb. The central structure definitely appeared to be some kind of control center. Thick bundles of organic conduits ran from it to all parts of the maze, carrying what were probably control signals and nutrients. If Park Jun could reach that central hub, he could probably access the maze's management systems, but first, he needed to understand the maze's circulation patterns. He spent another 10 minutes mapping the flow of glowing fluid through the visible conduits. Like any biological system, the maze had predictable circulation patterns. Nutrients flowed out from the center through major arteries, then returned through smaller vessels after being distributed to the wall systems. Park Jun climbed down to ground level and consulted his tablet. The mapping software had identified several possible routes to the central hub. The most direct path would take him through heavily traveled prisoner areas, where the walls would be most active and adaptive. But there were other options, like any building. The maze had service corridors. The nutrient distribution system required maintenance access, waste removal pathways, and emergency circulation routes. These would be smaller passages, probably hidden from normal view, but they would provide direct access to the central systems. Park Jun shouldered his backpack and began walking purposefully toward the nearest service access point his tablet had identified. As he walked, he reflected on the conversation with Warden Vextal. The alien had been so proud of this maze, calling it the ultimate prison designed by the most advanced bioengineering in the galaxy. But from Park Jun's perspective, it was just another building with poor maintenance access and insufficient redundancy in its control systems. The architects had been so focused on psychological manipulation that they had ignored basic structural principles. Any first-year engineering student would have spotted the problems immediately. The maze was overdesigned for its intended function, relied too heavily on a single central control system, and completely lacked security measures for three-dimensional access. Park Jun found the service entrance exactly where his tablet predicted it would be. It was concealed behind a fold in the wall, invisible to someone walking at ground level, but clearly visible from above. The opening was just large enough for a human to crawl through. He checked his watch. He had been in the maze for 23 minutes. According to Warden Vextal, most prisoners died within 30 days. Park Jun estimated he would be out in about 7 more minutes. He crawled into the service tunnel and began following the nutrient conduits toward the central hub. Park Jun crawled through the service tunnel with his tablet held in front of him, its screen providing the only light in the narrow passage. The walls here were different from the main corridors. Instead of the thick, fleshy material designed to impress and intimidate prisoners, these surfaces were purely functional. Thin membranes stretched over supporting structures, pulsing with the flow of nutrients and control signals. The tunnel was exactly what Park Jun had expected to find. In any large biological system, every building needed maintenance access, whether it was made of steel and concrete or grown from engineered flesh. The architects of this maze had been so focused on psychological torture that they had forgotten basic engineering principles. As he crawled, Park Jun's tablet continued mapping the service system. The software traced the flow patterns of the glowing fluid through transparent tubes running along the tunnel walls. These were clearly the maze's circulatory system, carrying both nutrients to feed the living walls and control signals to coordinate their movements. After crawling for about 3 minutes, Park Jun reached a junction where several service tunnels met. Here, the space opened up enough for him to sit comfortably and study his tablet's readings. The mapping software had been analyzing the maze's structure during his journey, and the results were fascinating. The facility showed clear mathematical patterns in its design. What the aliens described as infinite chaos was actually based on fractal geometry. The passages repeated the same basic shapes at different scales, like the branches of a tree or the structure of a lung. This kind of pattern was common in biological systems, but it also made the structure completely predictable once you understood the underlying mathematics. Park Jun opened his engineering analysis program and fed it the structural data. Within seconds, the software identified the maze as a modified Sierpinski carpet pattern, rotated into 3 dimensions and overlaid with organic circulation systems. Any mathematician could have mapped this structure in a few hours, given the right tools and perspective. The tablet also revealed something else interesting about the maze's design. The control signals flowing through the circulation system followed predictable patterns based on prisoner movements. When a prisoner approached a wall section, chemical signals would flow to that area, instructing it to change shape or create illusions. But the system had built-in delays and processing limitations. Like any biological system, the maze could not react instantly to every stimulus. It needed time to process information, make decisions, and implement changes. The response time appeared to be approximately 30 seconds for major wall modifications, and about 5 seconds for simple movements like opening and closing passages. This explained why the maze had trouble adapting to Park Jun's climbing technique. The system was designed to track horizontal movement through corridors. When he climbed vertically, the control system took precious seconds to recognize the unusual behavior and even longer to figure out how to respond. Park Jun continued crawling through the service tunnels, following the main nutrient lines toward the central hub. As he got closer to the center, the biological infrastructure became more complex. Multiple circulation systems ran parallel to each other, carrying different types of fluids and signals. The walls here showed more sophisticated structures, with what appeared to be nerve clusters and processing nodes. The tablet's sensors detected increasing electromagnetic activity as well. The maze's control system was clearly more than just biological. It incorporated technological elements, probably quantum processing units integrated with the organic material. This hybrid approach explained how the maze could create such sophisticated illusions and coordinate such complex behavioral patterns, but hybrid systems also had inherent weaknesses. Biological components and technological components operated on different principles and at different speeds. The interfaces between them created bottlenecks and failure points that could be exploited by someone who understood both systems. Park Jun reached another junction and checked his position on the tablet's map. He was now less than 500 meters from the central hub. The service tunnel ahead showed signs of increased security measures. Sensor clusters dotted the walls, and the passage itself had contracted to barely shoulder width, but the security was designed to detect and repel biological intrusions, probably infections or parasites that might damage the maze's systems. The sensors were calibrated for alien biochemistry and electromagnetic signatures. They completely ignored Park Jun's human physiology, and his tablets carefully shielded electronics. As Park Jun squeezed through the narrow security section, he could see the central hub ahead of him. The service tunnel ended at a maintenance access panel, a circular opening covered by a thin membrane that would part automatically when approached by authorized maintenance organisms. Park Jun was definitely not an authorized maintenance organism, but the security system could not tell the difference. His human biochemistry was so different from anything in the system's database that the sensors essentially ignored him as irrelevant background noise. The membrane parted as he approached, and Park Jun found himself looking into the maze's central control chamber. The hub was a spherical space about 20 meters across, filled with organic machinery that pulsed and flowed like a living heart. Thousands of control conduits entered the chamber from all directions, carrying signals to and from every part of the maze. At the center of the sphere, a massive processing cluster hung suspended in nutrient fluid, its surface covered with what appeared to be neural networks and quantum processing nodes. Park Jun pulled himself through the access panel and stood on a narrow maintenance platform that circled the chamber's interior. His tablet immediately began analyzing the central system, its sensors drinking in electromagnetic patterns and biological signatures from the surrounding machinery. The results confirmed his theories about the maze's operation. The central processor was indeed a hybrid system, combining organic neural networks with quantum computing elements. It monitored every prisoner through microscopic sensors embedded in the maze walls, analyzed their behavior patterns, and generated appropriate psychological responses, but the system had clear limitations. It could only process a finite amount of information at once, and it relied on predictable behavioral models for different species. When presented with truly novel behavior, like a prisoner who ignored the maze's intended psychological triggers, the system became confused and inefficient. Park Jun studied the control interfaces around the chamber. Most were clearly designed for alien physiology, with touch surfaces calibrated for different types of appendages and sensory organs. But there were also manual override systems, probably installed for emergency maintenance. More importantly, Park Jun could see the maze's basic operating principles displayed on biological monitor surfaces around the chamber. The entire system was designed around a simple assumption: prisoners would stay on the ground level and try to find exits through the corridor system. Every psychological trick, every illusion, every wall movement was optimized for this expected behavior. The maze had no protocols for dealing with prisoners who climbed walls, used service tunnels, or ignored the intended psychological manipulation. When faced with such behavior, the system defaulted to increasingly frantic but ultimately useless responses. Park Jun found what he was looking for on the chamber's far side: a master control interface with clear override capabilities. The system was sophisticated, but like any large installation, it needed manual controls for maintenance and emergency situations. He approached the interface and began studying its layout. The controls were labeled in several alien languages, but the functions were obvious to anyone with experience in complex system management. There were status monitors, process controls, emergency overrides, and system diagnostics. Most importantly, there was a prisoner release protocol. In case of system failure or facility evacuation, the maze could open direct exit routes and disable all psychological countermeasures. The protocol required authorization from the central control system, but Park Jun's tablet had been analyzing the authorization codes since he entered the chamber. The codes were not particularly sophisticated. They were based on biological markers from approved alien species, cross-referenced with security clearances stored in the quantum processing nodes. But the system had no defense against someone who could simply reprogram the authorization database. Park Jun connected his tablet to the control interface through a universal adapter he carried for exactly these kinds of situations. His engineering software immediately began communicating with the maze's control systems, translating between human-computer protocols and alien biotechnological interfaces within 2 minutes. Park Jun had full administrative access to the maze's operating systems. He could see the location and status of every prisoner, monitor all psychological manipulation programs, and control every aspect of the facility's operation. According to the system logs, there were currently 143 active prisoners from 37 different species. Most had been in the maze for less than a month, but some, like the Vicarian he had met, had been trapped for years or even decades. Park Jun began. Park Jun pressed the final command sequence on his tablet, and the maze's central control system responded immediately. Throughout the facility, emergency lighting began to activate as the prisoner release protocol engaged. The constant pulsing of the organic walls slowed to a steady, calm rhythm, and the psychological manipulation systems powered down one by one on his tablet screen. Park Jun watched status indicators change from red to green as each system component acknowledged the shutdown command. The maze that had operated continuously for 3,000 years was finally taking a break. Through the central chamber's organic walls, Park Jun could hear sounds echoing from the corridors outside. Prisoners who had been wandering in circles for days, weeks, or years were suddenly seeing clearly marked exit signs for the first time. The maze's illusion generators had stopped working, and the walls had stopped shifting and changing. Park Jun checked the system logs one more time to ensure the release protocol was functioning correctly. All 143 prisoners showed green status indicators, meaning they had clear paths to the facility's exits. The biomechanical systems that had trapped them were now actively guiding them toward freedom. He disconnected his tablet from the control interface and shouldered his backpack. The maintenance access panel he had used to enter the central chamber was still open, but Park Jun decided to take a more direct route out. According to the facility schematics now stored on his tablet, there was a maintenance shaft that led directly to the administrative section of the prison complex. The shaft was designed for emergency access by facility maintenance crews. It bypassed all the psychological barriers and security systems that were meant to keep prisoners trapped in the maze proper. Like most emergency systems, it was built to be simple, direct, and impossible to get lost in. Park Jun crawled through the shaft for about 5 minutes, following clear directional markers that glowed with soft bioluminescent light. The shaft emerged in what appeared to be a storage room filled with organic machinery and monitoring equipment. Through a translucent wall, he could see alien technicians running around in apparent panic. The wall parted automatically as Park Jun approached it, recognizing him as someone with administrative access to the facility's systems. He stepped through into a corridor filled with bustling alien activity. Nobody paid attention to him initially, as they were all focused on the flashing alert displays and emergency announcements echoing through the facility's communication system. Park Jun walked calmly through the chaos until he found what appeared to be the main control room. Through its transparent walls, he could see Warden Vextal surrounded by alien technicians, all of them staring at monitoring displays with expressions of confusion and alarm. Park Jun knocked politely on the doorframe. The room fell silent, as all the aliens turned to stare at him. "Excuse me," Park Jun said politely. "Could I use your communication system to call the human embassy? I need to let them know where I am." Warden Vextal stared at Park Jun for several long seconds, his triangular head tilting from side to side as if trying to process impossible information. How. Vextal finally managed to speak. "How are you here? How are you in this section of the facility? How are you not in the maze?" "I got out," Park Jun explained, as if this should be obvious. "The maze had some design problems, so I fixed them and activated the emergency release protocol. All the other prisoners should be exiting the facility right about now." One of the technicians pointed at a monitoring display that showed the maze's main exit portal. A steady stream of confused but relieved prisoners was walking out into the daylight, many of them seeing the sky for the first time in years. "Impossible," Vextal whispered. "The maze cannot be solved. It has never been solved. The infinite labyrinth of Kethver is the ultimate prison. No being in the galaxy has ever escaped it." "Well," Park Jun said thoughtfully, "technically I did not escape it. I just turned it off. The maze is still there. It is just not operating in prison mode anymore. You could probably restart it if you wanted to, though I would recommend fixing the security vulnerabilities first." Park Jun pulled out his tablet and showed the screen to Warden Vextal. The device displayed a complete three-dimensional map of the entire facility with detailed engineering analysis of every system and subsystem. The main problems were insufficient three-dimensional security coverage and over-reliance on behavioral assumptions. Park Jun explained. The maze was designed to contain prisoners who think in 2 dimensions and follow predictable movement patterns. But any prisoner capable of climbing or basic engineering analysis could bypass the intended containment systems. Vextal took the tablet with shaking hands and stared at the detailed schematics. The display showed security vulnerabilities highlighted in red, structural weaknesses marked in yellow, and recommended improvements listed in neat columns of text. You mapped the entire facility?" Vextal asked weakly. Yes, it took about 15 minutes, Park Jun replied. The maze follows a standard fractal pattern based on Sierpinski carpet geometry. Once you identify the mathematical basis, the rest is just data collection and analysis. But the psychological barriers, one of the technicians protested. The illusions, the mental manipulation, the despair induction systems. Those only work if you pay attention to them, Park Jun said. I was focused on solving an engineering problem, so I ignored the psychological elements. They became irrelevant background noise. Park Jun gestured toward the communication panel on the control room wall. So, about that call to the embassy? Warden Vextal slowly handed the tablet back to Park Jun and walked over to the communication system. His movements seemed mechanical, as if he was operating on automatic pilot while his mind processed the impossible situation. What should I tell them? Vextal asked. Just ask for Ambassador Kim Nari, Park Jun said. Tell her that Park Jun is ready to be picked up. She will know what that means. Vextal activated the communication system and sent the message. Within minutes, a response came back. Ambassador Kim Nari's voice filled the control room, speaking in crisp professional tones. Warden Vextal, this is Ambassador Kim Nari. We understand you have completed Park Jun's diplomatic transfer. We will send a transport to collect him immediately. Diplomatic transfer? Vextal repeated in confusion. Did I not mention that? Park Jun asked. I am not actually a criminal. I am a consulting engineer working on a diplomatic mission. The trespassing charge was just a cover story to get me access to your facility. The control room fell completely silent. Every alien in the room stared at Park Jun with expressions that might have been horror, disbelief, or admiration. It was hard to tell with alien facial expressions. You mean, Vextal said slowly, that this was all intentional? The human government sent you here specifically to break out of our ultimate prison? Not exactly, Park Jun replied. The diplomatic mission was legitimate. But when the local authorities decided to arrest me and put me in your maze, Ambassador Kim Nari thought it might be a good opportunity to field test some theories about human problem-solving approaches. Park Jun checked his watch and made a note on his tablet, 30 minutes, start to finish. That includes initial facility survey, structural analysis, route planning, system infiltration, and prisoner release protocol execution. Not bad for a first attempt. One of the technicians was studying the monitoring displays that showed the maze's current status. The facility is completely shut down, the technician reported. All prisoners have been released. All psychological countermeasures are offline. The entire system is in emergency maintenance mode. Can we restart it? Vextal asked desperately. Probably, Park Jun said, but I would recommend a complete security overhaul first. The current design has at least 47 major vulnerabilities that I identified during my brief survey. Any competent engineer from most spacefaring species could probably exploit them. Park Jun pulled up another screen on his tablet, showing a detailed report of recommended security improvements. The fixes are not complicated, he continued. Better three-dimensional coverage, redundant control systems, quantum encrypted security protocols, and behavioral analysis programs that account for non-standard prisoner responses. I could write up a complete specification if you are interested. Before Vextal could respond, an announcement echoed through the facility's communication system. A human transport ship had arrived and was requesting permission to collect their diplomatic personnel. That would be my ride, Park Jun said, shouldering his backpack. It has been very educational. Thank you for the interesting engineering challenge. He walked toward the exit, then paused and turned back to Warden Vextal. Oh, and you might want to check on that Vicarian prisoner I met in Corridor Section 7. He has been counting days for over 10 years. He probably needs medical attention and psychological counseling. Park Jun left the control room and walked through the facility's administrative corridors toward the main exit. Behind him, he could hear the sounds of alien voices raised in heated discussion, probably trying to figure out how to explain this situation to their superiors. The transport ship was waiting on the landing pad outside the facility. Ambassador Kim Nari stood beside it. The emergency session of the Kethver Prison Authority convened 6 hours after the Infinite Labyrinth incident. Warden Vextal sat at the center of a circular chamber, surrounded by the facility's board of directors, chief engineers, and security specialists. Holographic displays showed the current status of the maze, completely shut down, all systems in emergency maintenance mode, 0 prisoners contained. Director Zalaneth, a massive creature with 4 arms and crystalline skin, spoke first. Explain. To us, Warden Vextal, how a single human prisoner disabled our ultimate containment facility in less than 30 minutes. Vextal's triangular head drooped with shame. The human did not follow expected behavioral patterns. Instead of attempting to navigate the maze through normal ground-level passages, it climbed the walls and observed the facility from above. Climb the walls? Chief Engineer Mordai's tentacles writhed in confusion. The walls are 50 meters high. No prisoner has ever attempted such behavior. The human came equipped with climbing tools, Vextal explained. When our guards examined its possessions, they saw only strange mechanical devices. They did not understand that these tools could be used for vertical movement. Director Zalaneth activated a holographic replay of Park Jun's movements through the facility. The assembled aliens watched in silent amazement as the human completely ignored the maze's intended operation, treating the psychological prison like a construction project. Look at its behavior patterns, Chief Psychologist Rintel observed. The human shows no response to the illusion generators, no fear of the wall movements, no despair at apparent dead ends. It treats our most sophisticated psychological warfare systems as background noise. Security Chief Kavlex leaned forward with interest. How did it access the central control chamber? That area requires biological authorization from approved species. The human used service tunnels, Vextal replied. Maintenance access routes that were designed for facility upkeep. The security systems ignored it because its biochemistry did not match any known prisoner species profile. The holographic replay showed Park Jun crawling through the service tunnels with obvious familiarity, as if he had been designed such systems before. His movements were efficient and purposeful, showing no hesitation or confusion about where he was going. Most concerning, Chief Engineer Mordai said, is how quickly it understood our biotechnological systems. This human had no prior exposure to our technology, yet it interfaced with our central control systems as if they were familiar equipment. Director Zalaneth paused the replay at the moment Park Jun connected his tablet to the maze's control interface. What is that device it is using? A human computing device, Vextal replied. The human called it a tablet. We allowed it to keep the device because it appeared to be a simple tool with no military applications. And this simple tool could communicate with our quantum biological control systems? Apparently, yes. The human's device contained what it called universal adapters and translation protocols. It could interface with virtually any technological system, regardless of the underlying architecture. The assembled aliens fell silent as they contemplated the implications. Their ultimate prison, designed using the most advanced technology in their civilization, had been defeated by what the human considered standard work equipment. Chief Psychologist Rintel pulled up detailed behavioral analysis of Park Jun's time in the maze. The human psychological profile is unlike anything we have encountered. It shows no fear response to isolation, no despair at apparent hopelessness, no frustration at complex problems. Instead, it demonstrates what can only be described as engineering curiosity. What does that mean? Director Zalaneth asked. The human was not trying to escape from a prison, Rintel explained. In its mind, it was solving an interesting technical problem. The maze's psychological barriers were irrelevant because the human was not psychologically engaged with them as intended. Security Chief Kavlex brought up the facility's historical records. In 3,000 years of operation, no prisoner has ever approached the maze as a technical problem to be solved. Every species we have encountered treats it as a psychological challenge, exactly as designed, which raises disturbing questions about human psychology, Chief Engineer Mordai observed. If they do not respond to psychological manipulation, In predictable ways, how do we contain them? How do we predict their behavior? Warden Vextal activated another display showing the humans' complete analysis of the maze structure. The document was detailed, professional, and devastatingly accurate in its identification of security vulnerabilities. The human has provided the U.S. with a comprehensive report on the facility's weaknesses, Vextal said. Its analysis is more thorough than our own engineering assessments. It identified vulnerabilities that our design teams never considered. Director Zalaneth studied the report with growing alarm. According to this analysis, our supposedly ultimate prison has dozens of critical security flaws. How is this possible? Our design philosophy was based on psychological containment, Chief Engineer Mordai admitted. We focused on creating mental barriers rather than physical ones. We assumed that any prisoner capable of reaching our facility would think and behave in predictable ways. But humans do not think in predictable ways, Chief Psychologist Rintel said. Their approach to problem-solving is fundamentally different from other species. Where we see insurmountable challenges, they see engineering projects. Where we see psychological barriers, they see irrelevant distractions. The meeting was interrupted by an urgent communication from the facility's communication center. A technician's voice filled the chamber through the intercom system. Directors, we are receiving inquiries from prison facilities throughout the sector. Word of the maze incident is spreading rapidly. Several facilities are reporting that their human prisoners are suddenly asking about wall thickness and structural specifications. The assembled directors looked at each other with growing concern. The implications were becoming clear. If one human could solve their ultimate prison in 30 minutes, what could other humans do to supposedly secure facilities throughout the galaxy? How many humans are currently imprisoned in Kethver sector facilities? Director Zalaneth asked. The technician's response came immediately. 12 humans across 6 facilities, sir. All imprisoned for various diplomatic incidents and territorial violations. Contact all facilities immediately, Zalaneth ordered. Implement maximum security protocols for all human prisoners. No access to personal equipment, no contact with other prisoners, no opportunities for facility observation. Sir, the technician replied hesitantly. 3 facilities report that their human prisoners have already requested meetings with facility administrators. They claim to have identified security vulnerabilities and wish to discuss facility improvements. The chamber fell completely silent. Every alien present understood the implication. The humans were not just escaping. They were analyzing and critiquing the galaxy's most secure facilities as if they were professional consultants. Chief Engineer Mordai spoke first. We need to completely rethink our approach to human containment. Traditional prison design is clearly inadequate for this species. More than that, Director Zalaneth said grimly, we need to understand what this means for galactic security. In general, if humans can casually defeat our best containment systems, what else might they be capable of? Security Chief Kavlex brought up strategic assessments of human space. Intelligence reports suggest that humans are expanding rapidly throughout their local region. They have established colonies on worlds that other species considered uninhabitable. They have built structures in environments we thought were too hostile for permanent habitation. And now we know why, Chief Psychologist Rintel said. They approach environmental challenges the same way they approached our maze. They ignore the psychological barriers and focus on engineering solutions. Warden Vextal stood up slowly, his shame evident in every movement. Directors, I request permission to resign my position. The failure of the infinite labyrinth occurred under my supervision. I accept full responsibility. Director Zalaneth considered this request for several moments. Your resignation is denied? Warden Vextal, you will instead oversee the complete redesign of our containment systems, using the human's analysis as a starting point. We need to understand these beings if we are to coexist with them in the galaxy. What about the human itself? Vextal asked. Park Jun is currently aboard a diplomatic transport with Ambassador Kimnari, Should we attempt to detain them for further study? Absolutely not, Director Zalaneth said firmly. The last thing we need is to provoke a diplomatic incident with a species that can casually disable our most secure facilities. We will treat this as a learning experience and adjust our policies accordingly. The meeting continued for several more hours as the directors grappled with the implications of the maze incident. By the time they adjourned, one thing was clear. The galaxy's understanding of human capabilities would need to be completely revised throughout the sector. Prison administrators were already implementing emergency protocols for human prisoners. But many suspected that these measures would prove inadequate. The humans had demonstrated something that The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 3 days after news of the Infinite Labyrinth incident reached the capital world of Nexus. Prime representatives from 400 species packed the massive chamber, their translation devices creating a constant buzz of converted languages as word of the unprecedented security breach spread throughout the galaxy. Chancellor Yexori, an ancient being whose crystalline form had presided over the council for 6 centuries, called the session to order with a gesture that sent ripples of light through her translucent body. We are here to discuss the implications of recent events at the Kethver facility, she announced. For the first time in recorded galactic history, a Class 12 maximum security containment system has been completely compromised by a single prisoner. Representative Morketh of the Vicarian Assembly raised one of his 4 arms. Honored Chancellor, my species has lost citizens to the Infinite Labyrinth for over 2 millennia. If this human has truly found a way to defeat the maze, we demand immediate access to this technology. A wave of similar demands rippled through the chamber as representatives from dozens of species voiced their own claims. Many had lost citizens to the maze over the centuries, and the news that it could be defeated had ignited hope throughout the galaxy. The situation is more complex than a simple escape, reported Security Coordinator Zalvex. According to the official incident report, the human did not merely escape the facility. It completely disabled the containment system and released all 143 prisoners currently held there. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Infinite Labyrinth had not just been beaten. It had been turned off like a malfunctioning machine. Ambassador Kim Nari stood at the human delegation's platform, her expression calm and professional despite the chaos around her. The Galactic Council requested a full report on the incident. I am prepared to provide that briefing now. Chancellor Yexori's form flickered with acknowledgement. The Council recognizes Ambassador Kim Nari of the Human Federation. Kim Nari activated a holographic display that showed the complete timeline of Park Jun's time in the maze. The assembled representatives watched in fascination as the human completely ignored the facility's intended operation. Park Jun approached the maze as an engineering problem rather than a psychological challenge, Kim Nari explained. His analysis identified the facility as a biotechnological hybrid system with predictable structural patterns and multiple security vulnerabilities. Representative Thalrix of the Gornian Empire leaned forward with interest. How long did this analysis take? Approximately 15 minutes for initial structural mapping, Kim Nari replied. An additional 30 minutes for system infiltration and prisoner release protocol execution. The chamber erupted in confused voices as representatives struggled to process this information. The maze that had contained prisoners for 3,000 years had been completely analyzed and defeated in less than 30 minutes. This is impossible, declared Chief Engineer Vorden of the Calaxian Hegemony. The Infinite Labyrinth was designed using our most advanced bioengineering techniques. It incorporates quantum processing elements and adaptive psychological manipulation systems. No being could understand such complexity so quickly. Kim Nari displayed Park Jun's technical analysis on the chamber's main screen. The document was detailed, thorough, and written in clear technical language that any engineer could follow. Park Jun's report identifies the maze as a standard Sierpinski carpet fractal pattern modified for 3-dimensional space. She continued. The psychological manipulation systems follow predictable biological programming protocols. The security vulnerabilities are consistent with design philosophies that prioritize psychological barriers over physical containment. Representative Zentai of the Ethereal Collective spoke with obvious confusion, but the psychological barriers were the point. The maze was designed to be inescapable through mental manipulation and despair induction. Physical barriers were considered unnecessary. That approach works well for species that respond predictably to psychological manipulation, Kimnari acknowledged. However, humans often approach problems from purely practical perspectives. When focused on solving a technical challenge, psychological barriers become irrelevant background noise. Security Coordinator Zalvex brought up additional data on his display. This incident is not isolated. Since news of the maze breach became public, we have received reports from 17 other maximum security facilities. Human prisoners in each location have requested meetings with administrators to discuss facility improvement opportunities. The chamber buzzed with alarmed conversations as representatives realized the scope of the problem. It was not just one exceptional human. It appeared to be a species-wide characteristic. What specific improvements are they suggesting? Asked Representative Kelmuth of the Andromedan Alliance. Structural reinforcement, redundant security systems, improved three-dimensional coverage, and quantum-encrypted control protocols, Zalvex replied. Their analyses are technically accurate and professionally presented. Several facility administrators report that the human suggestions would significantly improve security effectiveness. Chancellor Yuxoria's crystalline form pulsed with concern. Are we to understand that humans possess superior engineering knowledge compared to our most advanced civilizations? Kimnari chose her words carefully. Humans approach engineering problems differently than most species. We tend to focus on practical solutions rather than elegant theories. We also have extensive experience with hostile environments that require robust, reliable systems. Hostile environments? Representative Morkith inquired. Earth is a remarkably dangerous planet by galactic standards, Kimnari explained. Extreme weather patterns, active geology, aggressive wildlife, and unpredictable natural disasters. Human civilization developed in constant response to environmental challenges that would destroy most other species. She activated another display showing comparative planetary data. The assembled representatives stared in shock at Earth's environmental statistics. The world that had produced humans was classified as a classics hazard world, barely suitable for industrial operations. You evolved on a death world, Representative Thalric said with something approaching awe. That explains the engineering mindset. You had to solve survival problems that other species never faced. It also explains their psychological resistance to manipulation, added Chief Psychologist Vendel of the Mentalist Consortium. A species that survived in such an environment would develop immunity to fear-based control systems. Psychological barriers would be meaningless to beings who face existential threats as a matter of routine. Security Coordinator Zalvex raised a new concern. We have identified 37 additional facilities throughout the galaxy that use containment systems similar to the Infinite Labyrinth. If humans can defeat these systems as easily as they defeated the maze, we face a potential security crisis. More than that, Representative Kelmuth observed. If humans can casually analyze and improve our most advanced security systems, what other technologies might they be able to understand and enhance? The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. The humans were not just another new species joining galactic civilization. They were a species with fundamentally different approaches to problem solving, backed by evolutionary experience that other beings could barely comprehend. Chancellor Yuxoria's form brightened as she reached a decision. The Council will establish a formal technology assessment committee to evaluate human engineering capabilities. We need to understand the full scope of their abilities and how this knowledge might benefit galactic civilization. With respect, Honored Chancellor, Kimnari interjected, the Human Federation would be happy to participate in such an assessment. However, we would prefer to frame it as a collaborative exchange rather than an evaluation. We have much to learn from galactic civilization, just as we may have insights to offer. Agreed, Chancellor Yexori replied. This will be a mutual exchange of knowledge for the benefit of all species. Representative Vordan of the Calaxian hegemony raised a practical concern. What do we do about our current human prisoners? If standard containment methods are ineffective, how do we maintain security? Kimnari smiled diplomatically. Most of our citizens currently in galactic custody were arrested for minor diplomatic violations or territorial misunderstandings. The Human Federation would be happy to negotiate their release in exchange for formal diplomatic protocols that prevent such incidents in the future. And if they refuse release? Security Coordinator Zalvex asked. That would be unusual, Kimnari replied. Humans generally prefer to return home after completing their work. However, if any choose to remain in galactic custody, I suggest treating them as consulting engineers rather than prisoners. Their expertise could be valuable for facility improvements. The suggestion caused another wave of discussion throughout the chamber. The idea of treating prisoners as technical consultants was unprecedented in galactic law, but it seemed to be the most practical approach to the situation. Chancellor Yexori called for order. The Council will recess for deliberation. We will reconvene tomorrow to vote on formal. Park Jun sat in the comfortable chair aboard the human diplomatic transport, reviewing engineering reports on his tablet while the ship traveled through hyperspace toward Earth. He had been working steadily for the past 6 hours, documenting his analysis of the infinite labyrinth and preparing technical specifications for the security improvements he had suggested to Warden. Vex single quotes Tal. Ambassador Kim Nari entered the passenger compartment carrying 2 cups of coffee and a concerned expression. We have received an urgent communication from the Galactic Council, she said, handing Park Jun one of the cups. They want to meet with you directly. Park Jun looked up from his tablet with mild interest. What kind of meeting? The kind that could change the direction of human-galactic relations for the next century, Kimnari replied, settling into the chair across from him. They are offering you a position as chief prison architect for the entire Galactic Correctional Authority. Park Jun nearly choked on his coffee. They want me to design prisons? Not just design them, Kimnari explained. They want you to completely redesign their approach to prisoner containment. Your analysis of the maze has revealed fundamental flaws in how they think about security systems. They believe your engineering perspective could revolutionize their entire correctional infrastructure. Park Jun set down his coffee and considered this information. The offer was certainly unexpected, but not entirely surprising. The Infinite Labyrinth incident had demonstrated that galactic civilization had some interesting blind spots in their technological thinking. What exactly are they proposing? He asked. Kim Nari activated a holographic display that showed the formal offer document. Full diplomatic status, unlimited research budget, access to all galactic correctional facilities, and a team of the best engineers from 200 species. They are essentially offering you the opportunity to rebuild their entire prison system from the ground up. And the compensation? More credits than you could spend in 10 lifetimes, plus technology sharing agreements that would advance human engineering by centuries. Park Jun studied the offer document with the same methodical attention he applied to any engineering project. The scope was impressive, the resources were unlimited, and the technical challenges would be fascinating. It was the kind of opportunity that any engineer would find tempting, but there were problems with the proposal that probably had not occurred to the aliens making the offer. They are thinking about this wrong, Park Jun said finally. How so? Park Jun pulled up his analysis of the Infinite Labyrinth on his tablet. Look at the fundamental design philosophy behind the maze. The entire system was built around the idea that prisoners needed to be psychologically broken and maintained in a state of hopeless despair. The goal was not containment. It was torture. Kimnari nodded. The maze was designed to cause maximum psychological suffering while keeping prisoners alive as long as possible. Exactly, Park Jun continued. And that approach is not just morally questionable. It is also completely inefficient from an engineering standpoint. Resources that should be used for effective containment were instead devoted to elaborate psychological manipulation systems. Park Jun opened a new document on his tablet and began typing rapidly. If I were to redesign their correctional system, the first step would be to completely abandon the psychological torture approach. Effective prisoner containment should focus on rehabilitation, not punishment. The Galactic Council might not be interested in rehabilitation, Kim Nari observed. Many species view the correctional system as a deterrent rather than a reform mechanism. Then they are wasting enormous amounts of resources on an ineffective approach, Park Jun replied. Deterrent systems only work if they actually deter criminal behavior, but fear-based punishment systems typically increase recidivism rates, rather than reducing them. Park Jun pulled up comparative data from human correctional systems. Earth abandoned purely punitive prison systems centuries ago when we realized that rehabilitation programs were far more effective at reducing crime rates. The galactic approach is not just cruel, it is counterproductive. Kim Nari studied the data with interest. So you would recommend a complete philosophical overhaul of their correctional approach? That would be the logical starting point, Park Jun agreed. But I suspect the Galactic Council is not really interested in efficiency or effectiveness. They want me to help them build better torture chambers, not better rehabilitation facilities. The conversation was interrupted by an incoming communication alert. Kim Nari activated the ship's communication system, and the image of Chancellor Yexori appeared in the passenger compartment. The ancient being's crystalline form pulsed with urgent energy. Ambassador Kim Nari, we understand that Engineer Park Jun is reviewing our offer, Chancellor Yexori said without preamble. We are prepared to increase the compensation package significantly if necessary. Park Jun leaned forward to address the Chancellor directly. Honored Chancellor, I appreciate the generous offer, but I have some concerns about the underlying assumptions behind your correctional system design. What kind of concerns? The Chancellor asked. Park Jun activated his tablet and shared his analysis with the ship's communication system. Your current approach to prisoner containment is based on psychological manipulation and fear induction. These methods are not only inhumane, they are also inefficient and counterproductive. Chancellor Yexori's form flickered with confusion. We do not understand. The fear-based approach has been standard throughout galactic civilization for millennia. It serves as both punishment and deterrent. But does it actually work? Park Jun asked. Do your fear-based prisons reduce crime rates? Do they rehabilitate offenders? Do they make your society safer? The Chancellor's crystalline structure dimmed as she considered these questions. We have not evaluated the system from that perspective. The goal has always been punishment rather than prevention. Then you are wasting vast resources on a system that does not achieve your stated objectives, Park Jun replied. If I were to redesign your correctional infrastructure, I would focus on rehabilitation, education, and social reintegration rather than psychological torture. But what about deterrence? Chancellor Yexori asked. If prisons are not feared, will that not encourage criminal behavior? Park Jun pulled up additional data from human social research. Fear-based deterrence only works if potential criminals believe they will be caught and punished. But psychological torture systems actually reduce cooperation with law enforcement, making it harder to solve crimes and prosecute offenders. He shared comparative statistics showing crime rates in rehabilitation-focused systems versus punishment-focused systems. The data clearly demonstrated that humane correctional approaches were more effective at reducing criminal behavior. Your current system creates a cycle of fear and resentment that perpetuates criminal behavior, Park Jun explained. Prisoners who are psychologically broken by torture systems are more likely to commit crimes after release, not less likely. Chancellor Yexori studied the data with obvious surprise. This information contradicts everything we have believed about correctional philosophy. That is not uncommon, Park Jun replied diplomatically. Different species often develop different approaches to social problems based on their unique evolutionary and cultural backgrounds. Humans happen to have extensive experience with rehabilitation-based correctional systems. The Chancellor's form brightened with renewed interest. Would you be willing to consult on a pilot program? We could designate several facilities for experimental rehabilitation approaches while maintaining traditional systems elsewhere. Park Jun considered this proposal. A pilot program would allow him to demonstrate the effectiveness of humane correctional approaches without requiring the Galactic Council to abandon their existing systems immediately. That would be acceptable, he replied. But I would need complete autonomy over the pilot facilities. No psychological manipulation systems, no torture devices, no fear-based deterrence. The experimental facilities would focus entirely on rehabilitation, education, and preparation for social reintegration. Agreed, Chancellor Yexori said immediately. How many facilities would you need for a meaningful test? 12 facilities across different species populations, Park Jun replied after quick calculation. 3-year trial period with comprehensive data collection on recidivism rates, prisoner health outcomes, and social reintegration success rates. This is acceptable. We will prepare formal contracts and research protocols immediately. After the Chancellor's image disappeared, Kim Nari looked at Park Jun with admiration. You just committed to redesigning galactic correctional philosophy. That is a slightly larger project than fixing a single maze. Park Jun smiled and returned to his tablet. Every engineering project starts with identifying the real problem that needs to be solved. The Galactic Council thought their problem was building better torture chambers. But their real problem is that their entire approach to criminal justice is fundamentally flawed, and you think you can fix that? It is just another engineering problem, Park Jun replied, already sketching preliminary designs for rehabilitation facilities. The principles are the same whether you are building a space station life support. 6 months later, Park Jun stood on the construction platform of the Seoul Orbital Station project, wearing his usual work clothes and safety equipment. The massive space structure stretched for kilometers in all directions, its framework slowly taking shape as construction crews worked around the clock to meet their deadline. His colleague Lee Day approached carrying 2 cups of coffee and a concerned expression. You are late for the morning briefing, Lee said, handing Park Jun one of the cups. Again. Sorry, Park Jun replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. I had a conference call with the Galactic Council about the rehabilitation facility pilot program. The Andromedan representatives had some questions about the education curriculum design. Lee Day stared at his friend for several seconds. In the 6 months since Park Jun's return from the Kethver incident, their morning conversations had become increasingly surreal. You know, Lee said finally, when you said you might be a few days late getting back from that diplomatic mission, I thought you meant visa problems or delayed flights. I did not expect you to accidentally revolutionize galactic criminal justice systems. Park Jun shrugged and pulled out his tablet to review the day's construction schedule. It was not intentional. The maze just had some obvious design flaws that needed fixing. Obvious design flaws, Lee repeated. In the galaxy's most secure prison. That had operated successfully for 3,000 years. Successfully is probably the wrong word, Park Jun observed. The facility had a nearly 100% mortality rate among prisoners. That suggests fundamental problems with the operational design philosophy. Lee Day decided not to pursue this line of discussion. He had learned that Park Jun's matter-of-fact analysis of impossible achievements could be mentally exhausting for normal people. Instead, he gestured toward the construction site around them. How is the station project going? Are we still on schedule despite your galactic consulting work? Actually, we are ahead of schedule, Park Jun replied, showing Lee the progress charts on his tablet. The structural engineering techniques I developed for the rehabilitation facilities turned out to be applicable to low-gravity construction projects. The new support framework design is 30% more efficient than our original specifications. Lee Day studied the construction diagrams with genuine interest. The new designs were indeed elegant and efficient, incorporating principles that seemed obvious once explained but had somehow escaped human engineers for decades. Where did these design ideas come from? Lee asked. Alien bioarchitectural principles, Park Jun explained. The species that built the infinite labyrinth had some interesting approaches to structural efficiency. Their psychological applications were misguided, but the underlying engineering was quite sophisticated. A group of construction workers approached the platform, led by Site Supervisor Kim Min. She looked harried and was carrying a stack of reports that suggested problems somewhere on the project. Park Jun, we need your input on the life support system integration, Kim Min said without preamble. The environmental engineers are having trouble with the atmospheric circulation design for Sector 7. Park Jun accepted the reports and began reviewing them quickly. What specific problems are they encountering? Pressure differential calculations for the multi-species habitat modules, Kim Min explained. We have delegations from 12 different alien species scheduled to visit the station, and each species has different atmospheric requirements. Park Jun nodded thoughtfully. This was exactly the type of problem he had become accustomed to solving during his work on the galactic rehabilitation facilities. The solution is actually straightforward, he said, pulling up environmental engineering software on his tablet. You need to design the atmospheric systems like biological circulation networks rather than traditional mechanical ventilation systems. Within minutes, Park Jun had sketched out a new approach to the life support system that incorporated organic circulation principles he had learned from studying the maze's bio